Terry, what's going on?
Hi there.
Hey, man.
How you
How's your
doing?
day?
It's been okay.
Yeah,
Sorry, I
yeah.
was just having a snack while I was waiting.
I know it's dinner time, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I had to try to keep it as early as possible for the guys out east. There'll be a guy, Matt, he's joining from New Mexico, so he's a little bit closer than out east, I think. I don't know if New Mexico's in our time zone, but we'll see. But were you on the cranes today, or?
No, not today. Last week, I've been working with a company, Keller Foundations. They do a
Okay,
lot
yeah,
of the soil mixing and stuff like that.
yeah.
Before that, but I've been working with like Fraser River Pile and Dredge as well
Okay,
for a number of years.
yeah.
Here locally, I'm sure you're familiar with those guys. They're kind of all over the place, the red trucks.
Awesome. So what kind of inspired you to start your own business or kind of pick your first crane?
Well, I'm actually involved in the marijuana industry. So I got involved with that back in 2019. For that, I was working on the dredge and doing crane work and stuff like that with our PD. But because I'm an operating engineers member, that I got to go do the Rid Seal crane operator program basically for free. So I have my first level, and I think I'm like 800 hours shy of having enough to go back and do the second part, and then I'll have an unlimited tonnage Rid Seal. But once you start working for yourself, at one point you realize all the advantages and the perks of kind of being self-employed. So I'm trying to transition into owning a couple cranes at ZB. You know, I know there's some options of like F&G and Eagle West. Those guys hire kind of owner operators through the union and stuff like that. But like, I just don't know like what's the best one. Like, is a high ab like the go-to? Is like having a nice big boom with towing a trailer behind you is the best one? Like, do you want triaxle, like twin steer? I have a lot of questions.
There'll be a small meeting, so questions are definitely welcomed. Then, but we'll be covering a lot of it. So yeah, down from market to which cranes, and just kind of even like long-term more business goals too, like trying to find operators, for the cranes once we start expanding, right? Because a lot of guys are kind of tunnel vision on their first crane. So, and then they don't think of the ripple effect 5, 10, 15 years down the line. So we'll be doing kind of a perspective going backwards too, which will kind of definitely help. So
like I don't know, like like I can just go in like tomorrow basically, and or I can just rent a crane and I can get my 50-ton like tomorrow ticket if I wanted it, right? Like, but I'm sticking with trying to get the unlimited tonnage because I always feel like if something comes up in the future, if we were to take on a project, and if I can rent a crane just so I can finish that project or whatever, necessarily if I don't own it, then at least I'll be able personally have the ability to do that, which I think is like an asset. So,
oh, absolutely, yeah, because that's one of the most limiting factors, and we'll talk about that in a bit too, is your ticket. Some guys, have this low ticket, they start a business, and then it's like, well, how do you get a higher ticket? You don't even own a crane, to get that ticket, right? So it's like it's a lot of, sponsorships and messing around, and it's just way harder, right? So
yeah, because if you're not in the world of 80-ton and up, well then it's kind of impossible for you to get your Red Seal, right?
yeah,
So
yeah, no, I know one guy, so he is an owner operator. He started with high abs, now he's into like 80 tons. He ended up getting a partnership with a guy, kind of buying a crane with another guy. So this other guy's an owner operator. He's got a 140. So now the 80-ton guy is getting his Red Seal through his basically partner, which is a pretty sweet gig. But that's a rare opportunity that has to work for everybody too,
yeah,
right?
who you're working with can sign off on your hours. Is kind of like right.
Yeah,
Right?
that's one way of doing it, but that's trying to find a good partner in the crane industry can be tough. So
Yeah.
yeah. So how long have you been operating cranes then?
Well, like mobile crane, to be honest with you, I don't have a ton of experience. So like just I've mostly been on like crawler cranes, like 100-ton, 80-ton, and then a lot of it is as I'm not sure I'm familiar with Fraser River, but they own a big dredge on the river, and there's a couple cranes on there. So I used to like run the dredge, and then part of that was operating their 20-ton crane and stuff like that on board, which is a pedestal crane, for example. So I don't really have much experience running like truck crane. Like it's mostly like show up on site to some crawlers or something that's stationary, right? So that's why, like for me, like I would love to get into like the taxi world. Like I think that's kind of where I have the most interest. But yeah, like again, like I just don't know. Like there's so many different options between flat decks, towing the trailer, high hab, boom, like how much boom, and then like just because you can have an 80-ton, like if there's no need for it, if that's not a busy crane, is you just build it as being a hire, that's not necessarily in your favor either, right?
Exactly. Matt, how's it going? Welcome. You got audio there?
I think he's muted, looks like.
There it goes. How you doing?
Good, man. Nice to meet you. He's going to be joining us as well.
Okay.
So Matt, what's your background? Terry just kind of gave me the down low on his, and what's your background coming into this meeting?
I started 6 years ago doing government work, basically. Ran everything from a spider crane, 8.5-ton Broderson, 35-ton Tadano, 75-ton Tadano, 120-ton Grove, boom truck. That's about my resume, I guess. But we have a pretty big fleet of cranes where I'm at.
Yeah,
but it's all on. What's that?
Then your ticket, what does that look like as far as your red seal or
It was cutting out on me.
do you have what ticket do you have then?
CCCO and NCCCER, and then have my CDL also. Fixed cab, swing cab. The only thing I don't have is lattice. I've never ran anything with lattice.
Yeah. So Terry's done a little bit of that. So, we were just talking about it, like your ticket's like a huge factor in starting your business, right? It can limit you how far you can go up the ladder, right, of the crane. So so that's huge. It's nice that you guys have your bigger tickets, which is sweet. So
yeah, so there's no New Mexico, there's state license, but I'm anything over 100 tons, I guess.
Yeah.
So
that definitely helps. That's huge. So I'm just gonna share my screen here and we'll get started here, and we'll just cover things. If you guys have any questions on the go, just ask me. It's going to be us three tonight. I kept it small just so we can actually have a constructive conversation. I didn't want any YouTube just guys in their basement that have never operated cranes on a meeting. So I wanted to keep it real crane guys only. I'll share my screen. Gonna have to close some windows. Sorry guys, I got way too much going on right now. I'm just gonna have to open another window here. Alrighty, can you guys see my screen there?
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, it wouldn't let me share my PDF, so I'll have to just do it on the internet here, which is all good. Get this stuff out of the way. Perfect. So I've had a family business for 15 years. And then, so we started off with the 17-ton and then got into 28 tons, and now we're at 80 tons. But we made the mistake basically of getting a smaller crane first. And that's basically all my dad could afford at the time. So this is there's a lot of factors going into the first decision of your crane. So we're just going to be covering it basically on our mistakes and just how we solve those issues for you guys. So there's like the three biggest factors that are going to restrict you guys. Our finances are the biggest one. We can come up with like a great game plan tonight, but at the end of the day, the bank tells us what we can and cannot afford, right? So this is another biggest one, is actually starting the business and then getting into the industries and the different cranes too, right? And then your crane ticket, which we talked about a little bit there, of getting the right ticket so that you're not rejecting jobs, right? So the biggest one is that we're gonna it's going to be in order from more important to least important. So market needs. So I never buy a crane now unless the market needs it. So I see what the market needs, and then I buy a crane based off of that. So basically like local demand profiling. You guys are crane operators, so like you're dealing with guys like this. So you got to identify the industries in your region. So I'll just label a few here. So we got HVAC, roofing, rebar, trusses, roadwork, concrete, steel, lumber, tree removal, glass. So when I look at these industries, I want to know kind of what's happening in the next year, right? So with HVAC up in Canada here, they've actually taken a new law where I think it's Freon gas, where that's the older style gas in those units. So anything with that Freon style gas, which is every AC unit that is 20 years and old, or 20 years to 5 years ago, basically they stopped using it, has to be replaced. Any part you cannot service it anymore. It just, the entire unit has to be replaced. So HVAC, that's one thing that's gonna like really expand around here because of that one rule, right? So I'm constantly talking to customers and people in the industry to find out these different little things that are going to keep us busy, right? You got roofing, rebar. With roofing and rebar, a lot of it's like 7 a.m. deliveries, right? So the problem with the scheduling is like you can start getting these customers and then you end up only doing a 2-hour delivery. And then it's like, hey, how do I fill the rest of my day? So we have to kind of look at these different industries that way as well. I like HVAC and roofing because they are more recession proof, right? So HVAC, you need heating, you need the air conditioning. Roofing, if there's a leak, it has to be fixed. Roofs age, but it has to be done. So even in a recession when people aren't spending money, those two industries are still quite busy, which is huge because like up in Canada, Terry and I were starting, like it's getting into a pretty good recession. I don't know. Have you felt much of that, Terry?
Yeah, well, definitely a big delay on a lot of projects. A lot of land's been cleared, prepped for production or equipped for building, but it's just delayed at the moment. Where's around here, right?
Yeah. What about you, Matt? How's the economy down with you?
Where I'm at, they're actually pumping in a lot of money with our specific project where we're at. Building wise, it hasn't changed much, honestly. I feel like the economy's still doing decent.
Yeah. So that's awesome. I think you guys are doing a little bit better than us up here. So like trusses 2 years ago, we got pretty good interest rates, which kind of slowed the housing market down. Our trust customers told us, hey, next year we have barely any work coming in because these guys, they're doing the architectural and the engineering, right? So they know months in advance on these houses how busy they're going to be. So a couple of years ago, they were saying, hey, residential is going to really slow down where, we can see it. It's sometimes hard to believe when it's busy because, we're 6 months a year before that, right? So the ripple effect comes in maybe a year or 2 years later. So we're always asking our customers, hey, are you guys busy? Do you guys got much coming down the pipe, right? So 2 years ago, we decided, hey, we got to actually get out of the truss industry because it's going to be, pretty slow here. And sure enough, like the residential right now, it is super slow in our area. So anything trusses, lumber, concrete forms of the basement, roofing is quite slow. So if you start off in that slow economy and you start with a crane geared towards residential, doesn't matter how good you are or how great your truck is, you're just going to be slower, right? It's going to be a slower start. I would definitely in our area focus more on commercial right now because that's still pretty steady. So we've kind of got out of the trusses and then we actually got into tree removal. Tree removals still kind of, I would say, considered residential, but it's not like you're building the house, right? It's still, you're taking a lot of trees down in people's backyards, front yards, storm damage, stuff like that, right? If you have that kind of year to prepare, then you can actually kind of gear into it and still be busy doing the trusses because they haven't died yet. But then you get into the, get more customers in the tree removal. So there's a few things like, so steel is a good one. And you kind of want to be well-rounded, right? So you want to be, I find the best guys, the busiest guys right now are the ones that are in residential, in commercial, and then in these long-term projects, right? So steel, the thing with steel is like if you get a boom truck, for the most part, knuckle booms don't really do a lot of steel erection. So if you guys get a boom truck, your truck is on there for maybe a week, maybe a couple days, or maybe even like a month, depending on the project rate size. So you usually do a cheaper rate for steel erection just because you're not doing travel time and the crane's not working that hard. So steel guys always want a bit of a hourly discount, which is fine. That's just kind of how it works. But what happens is you make a lot of money. You could make 30 grand on a project pretty easily if it's pretty long. And the steel guys are actually pretty slow at paying because they have to finish their complete welding and finish their end before they get paid, or sometimes it's even the end of the project before they get paid. So you could be held up with that 30 grand, say, for 6 months, right? Which isn't great when you're starting them off. So it's just kind of something to be aware of, that some guys get paid when they're done the project, and then they pay you. So to just kind of have a heads up on that. Yeah. So to avoid like the scheduling issues, you want to basically say HVAC is first thing in the morning. You drop off that unit. It's 2 hours long. You're doing curb adapters and stuff like that. I like to do trusses or anything with like a big plant that have their own crane. Usually they can kind of fulfill their early mornings, but then it's their second, third jobs that they have trouble fulfilling with their own cranes. So that's why I like to work for like big companies with their own cranes on second, third job, because then they're a little bit more flexible that way. They can send their first cranes out the first morning, and then also residential. So like say hot tubs, anything where a guy's just paying you personally, like containers, different things like that. You want to book those guys in second, third job, because you want to save that time for basically your first most desired spot, right? That 7 a.m. start. So another thing that you want to align yourself with is the government projects, like Matt said, right? That the government's pumping a lot of money in. The city, what is the city planning on doing? Are they planning to build a university or a whole new kind of development in your area? You want to be kind of ahead of the game on those. Same with even just customers. When you start getting the customers, hey, is there a plan to expand and grow as well? Because we've grown with our customers, and then our customers basically say like, hey, we got big projects. Do you have a second crane that can supply our need, right? And then the biggest thing you want to avoid is oversaturated markets. So in our area, the oversaturated markets are the knuckle booms. I would not buy a knuckle boom in our area just because there's just a ton of them. They're easier to get, right? So in our area, we have like a 40 ton and under, so you can run a 40 ton stiff boom and unlimited knuckle boom. So that ticket's pretty easy to get. So that means most of the employment and the crane operators have the smaller crane ticket, right? So you'll find they'll get that ticket, then they'll start with knuckle booms. They can run any knuckle boom they want. And it's just it's getting crazy now that, because our economy blew up there, got really big, in COVID, and now it's shrinking. So now the flooded markets, like the knuckle boom market, are all kind of undercutting each other, and it's getting pretty bad. So the best way to avoid that is specialized sectors, like demanding skilled operators and premium rates. One of the reasons why we like the tree removal is because it is kind of dangerous, specialized work, right? So you got a tree climber up there, you lift them up on a man basket, or in the States, you can actually hook them up with your harness, right? And put them into the tree, and then they're chopping it, as you kind of rig up the section, and then they chop that section, you bring it down, right? So it's dangerous work. It's also a bit of guesswork where you don't know what the weight you're lifting, right? So you kind of have to you kind of, there's a trick to it, but you end up just kind of from the top down, you just make sure you stay at 50% capacity for the most part. but it is dangerous work. So a lot of guys stay away from it. And then a lot of the smaller cranes can't reach the tall trees, right? So that's just one market that you're going to get premium rates. You can charge the highest, right? Rates. When it comes to large scale projects, we're over on the right side now. You get fewer clients but higher revenue, right? So you can have a crane on a pipeline at a mine doing like the railroads. Like right now we're getting SkyTrain all the way up to Langley, so we have some cranes on there, and like the roads and the bridges, those big kind of government infrastructure jobs. Those are great if you can get onto them. Sometimes you have to be union, so sometimes you need to kind of be subbed out by a union if you're not going to join the union there. But it is, so it's like safety in a way where you're guaranteed maybe 6 months work or even a year's work on this big project. But what happens, a lot of guys, is they, after that project's done, it's maybe 3 months, 4 months, even 6 months to the next project, right? And they're just kind of sitting there. So you might make a ton of money that first year and pay off a bunch of your truck, but then you start kind of getting into trouble. So it's just good to have a mix of all this, right? You want to have the different residential, because eventually residential will recover. And then you want to be in commercial, which is busy right now. And then you want to be on these big projects like the SkyTrain and the big steel projects kind of thing to help out. So yeah, and the residential, commercial, the short jobs are more fast turnaround, right? You're getting paid way sooner. And it's a little bit more consistent scheduling wise. So you kind of know, hey, I got work coming in this next week and I got jobs, in the next few days. The biggest thing is, just don't be a one trick pony. If you buy a crane that is so specialized for one industry, eventually that industry will slow down, right? And then you'll be kind of shot in the foot. And then obviously we talked a bit about recession, but I say you got to be kind of politically proof too. There's a lot of politics when you get into the crane industry, with kind of guys favoring other companies. And say you bought a 60-ton crane, I have a 60-ton crane. It's like, well, now he's competition, right? So there's definitely helping everybody out and staying on everyone's good terms in the crane industry. You sub out a job to them, they'll sub out a job to you, and just kind of working that way. So and then also buying a truck that's good on fuel. So a lot of times, like if you buy a bigger truck, you can do smaller jobs, especially to start. You want to aim to get, like, say it's a 60-ton crane, you want to get 60-ton work, but you can still do 40-ton work, you can still do 30-ton work. But what happens is guys kind of get used to doing that 30-ton work with the 60-ton, and just to stay busy, and then they stop promoting themselves to try to get that 60-ton. And then they're just wasting, a ton of fuel, ton of maintenance on jobs that aren't paying what they need to pay, kind of thing. But the main thing is just to ask around, right? So ask these different trades, hey, what's going on in your industry in the next year? Ask the other crane operators, like, hey, which cranes, do you see out there, and what does this market need? Also other crane companies as well. Phoning them up and be like, hey, I'm new to the area and starting a business. And if you were to buy a crane that you don't have that would be great for this market, what crane would you buy? Those conversations go a long ways, and kind of planting seeds kind of thing. Do you guys have any questions on that?
No, I don't.
With the union work, what do you think stays more busy? Because I'm IUOE on the job I've been with them 6 years. That's where I'm contemplating in, do I stick with the union route or non-union route? Because so where I'm at, Barnhart, I don't know if you heard Barnhart Rigging and Crane. They bought out all the crane companies. They bought out Crane Service, which is the ML Holding Group. So they're out of Sweetwater, Texas. They're like big for like refineries and stuff. Yeah. But anyway, Barnhart bought out their branches in El Paso, Texas, and Albuquerque. So a whole southern New Mexico, and they have unlimited fleet of cranes, and they're union. They have a union and non-union side, I guess. So I just don't know what the pros and cons to each are.
Yeah, so basically you're going to be going up against the union kind of thing. So what you can do is focus more on the smaller jobs, right? Because do Barnhart have a lot of small cranes, or is that all just kind of the big kind of mobile cranes and RT cranes?
Yeah, they are RT80, but on their website I was looking, they have boom trucks also. So
Yeah, yeah, because they like big companies like that mostly focus on big infrastructure jobs, right?
Mhm.
And they get as many cranes as possible to, be able to supply the need for those big jobs. So your best bet is probably to focus on that residential, commercial, kind of smaller businesses, right? So
Mhm.
what happens when you guys start a business is, you start off with one yourself and a crane, right? So you will start to attract smaller companies because smaller companies want to work with you, not Barnhart. Because Barnhart, they know, hey, they're sending some union guy. He might just, sit there for half an hour doing a bunch of paperwork. When it's just like, hey, we could have set up the crane already and got
Mhm.
started. So that's going to be a huge. I say like use your weaknesses as your advantage. So if you come in and do things a lot more efficient and you have the right crane, you can easily beat out the bigger union guys by focusing on smaller companies. So companies from 1 to 10 people kind of thing. And there's quite a few like family businesses or HVAC guys that just have 1 to 10 installers, right? So I would say that's your best bet. Once you kind of you're in the union, then it's like, you buy your own truck, you're kind of going to be at the bottom, right, as far as seniority. So they're obviously going to give, the big guys, the big fish, all the work, and then,
Mhm.
they'll give you a bit. So, in my experience, you don't want to be at the mercy of either your competitors or the union. You want to take your work ethic and your crane into your own hands and not have anyone else basically controlling it. If you can, if you have good discussions with the union and say, hey, if you buy this type of crane and we can get you on these big projects and get you working right away, then that's your best bet too, right? Because then you got guaranteed work right at the start. You're not kind of
Mhm.
having a slow year at the very first year, right? So can you talk to your union representatives, and do you hear of many guys doing that or buying their own truck and being in the union?
I know most guys, they start their own business and,
Yeah,
go non-union side because, like I said, Barnhart actually bought out the two biggest union companies in Albuquerque. So now it's just them.
yeah,
They're
yeah,
they're the only they have everything.
yeah.
So,
So
so
they
I
they
mean,
could kind of crush, yeah, as far as
mhm.
the right? They're gonna obviously keep their Barnhart guys working. Uh,
Yep.
before you. So I would personally go non-union and kind of that way you can control your own destiny.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And financing isn't really an issue at this point in time. So
Yes, so you're good for buying a truck then. Yeah, so what kind of truck kind of coming into this meeting were you thinking of buying?
I'm not real specific on brands, but something the 80-ton range boom truck,
Yeah,
depending on price and deal and hours. And I haven't done too much research on it yet. I mean, this is
yeah,
my first step. So
yeah, fair enough. So yeah, we'll go down and cover trucks here now. So market's obviously your biggest one, but trucks is your second biggest one. So versatility is huge. We have a picture on the left here of one of my buddy's cranes. This is a guy that had a business, his own business for like I'd say 10 years, and then he was in a partnership, and then the partnership split up, and then he just like was like, "Okay, I'm kind of done with employees and partners. I'm just going to do it by myself." So he basically bought the most versatile, kind of knew the market, and he got this type of crane. I'm just going to use as an example for just like versatility. This is a rear mount knuckle boom, and it's got a jib, so I think it's got over 110 feet of boom, maybe a little bit more than that. So the nice thing about this crane is it's a rear mount. So anything rear mount you can just reverse right up to for the most part, and you're
Mhm.
as close as possible. So you can see that turret there is maybe 8 to 10 feet, from the center of it to his back bumper. And I think the outriggers go a little bit past his bumper. They come out at an angle there. So if you can get in close, you can do way more jobs, right? A big thing is reaching jobs now, because every project now, all the houses, everyone's, building way bigger houses, or the flip side is people can't afford houses, so they're building these massive apartments, right? So reach, I say, is king. Reach over capacity is always a rule that I go with, because if you think, yeah, go ahead.
What would be considered good reach? Because I see a lot of standard like 75 feet, 125, and then and kind of anything over 125, it's really labeled as kind of like a specialty, and there's a premium on that. Like anything over 125 feet, you could have the same tonnage, same truck setup, and for an extra 30 feet, you're looking at an extra $100,000, right? So like at that point, like what's the most everyday kind of like reach kind of span that you'd be looking for?
Yeah, so if you think about it in this way, like as far as just radius, if you get from 1 foot to 60 feet, there's a lot of cranes that can reach that radius, depending on the weight, obviously. But once you start getting from, past 70 to 90, that's kind of, I would say, mid-range for radius. You start to get, so now you're past 70 feet, which most knuckle booms are out the window now, right? They mostly have like 70 feet to, some of the bigger ones now have like 82 feet. So now you're past those. So then you get into the like 70 to 95 foot radius is now a decent sized crane, like kind of like the 40 ton, right? And then once you get past that, the amount of people that have that reach goes way down, right? So now you're way less. There's a bit more work there. So I'm a big fan of like anything with 120 feet of boom. Anything less than that, there's a lot of competition, right? This style of crane is actually meant to compete with a 40 ton, 120 feet of boom. So that's why he bought this. Like for a 40 ton flying steel, it's going to be way faster than this crane, right? You're not scoping in and out all day. So stiff booms have a major advantage as far as speed, but as far as versatility, like this style crane has way more advantage. They can go under power lines and reach 100 feet, right? Where a stiff boom can't. Or like you can see he's got a winch on it as well. So he can put rebar down into a hole. He can kind of articulate way better. So he's set up this crane for reach, and then he can take that jib off, and then that's a 100-ton knuckle boom. So it's got decent lifting capacity within when he takes that jib off, or within that kind of first 70 feet. So he can do some big lifts, big containers, big machines kind of thing too, right? So if that's quite a specialized crane. It's also like the footprint is a big deal when you guys buy a crane. So how wide is the footprint? How long is the truck? When outriggers are about 25 feet, 26 feet, if you're starting to get past that, it's starting to get too big, because by the time you reach over the side of your outrigger, that cuts off 14 feet right away, right? So you want a kind of a narrow, compact truck, especially because we're Albuquerque's a city. Our area is all kind of city work, right? So the driveways are tight. You want everything to be compact. You don't want to buy like a cheaper truck from the oil rigs that they just are driving down gravel roads in the bush. They can be twice as long. It doesn't matter, but down here it does matter. So there is a lot of knuckle booms and even boom trucks with the turret right behind the cab. So the closest, when you're driving into a site, you're better off driving in, and then you're roughly like 12 to 14 feet from your bumper to the turret, or you're maybe 12 feet from your center of your turret to the side of your outrigger. So that even is starting to get a little bit further away. So I don't like when the turrets are right behind the cab, because you're starting to get that, starting to get further away. So rear mounts, like
I'm confused. Further away, because there's telescoping booms where you got it up forward, hangs over, the cab of the truck over the hood.
Yeah.
Then you got other ones rear mounted, and I feel like they're used typically less tonnage, and they kind of go over the flat deck and then mount up like that. What's the disadvantage of having it directly behind the cab?
Behind the cab. So your closest radius, if you want to get the closest to something, it's directly out the side. So you put your outrigger down, and then you go directly out the side of it, right? So where if you have a rear mount, you still if you have a rear mount, you still go out the side all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can get that 5 feet closer by backing up to it in a perfect scenario, right? So the key to the turret is you want it to get it as close as possible without so it's either your bumper, front bumper, back bumper, or your side outrigger out the side. You want that to be as close as possible, basically, to whatever you're getting to, right? What you'll see is actual big knuckle booms right behind the cab, and they're like basically a triaxle. The knuckle boom is right over the front axle of the triaxle, and then so you have maybe like 20 feet to your front bumper, and then you have almost the same to your back bumper. And then because it's such a big crane, they have wider outriggers, so you're starting to get further away for doing different jobs when you could get a tighter compact crane and closer and reach the same kind of lift, right? So I'll go and I'll show you guys. We'll go down to the fleet down here. So you can see our 22 tons right in the middle there. They have the boom. Basically, they're about 5 feet behind the truck cab where you sit and drive, and then they point out the front. So when we pull into sites with a trailer, we can't obviously, when we reverse up to something, with a 40-foot trailer, our crane boom to reach out the back of something to reach something is so far away, right? It's 40, 50 feet. So we always have to nose in. Say if it's a driveway to a house to do trusses, we have to nose in. And then even from our nose to the turret is now about 17 feet. So our best chance is to do it out the side of the outrigger, and that's about 14 feet from the center of the crane turret. But you can't always get that, right? So you want a crane set up that you can get it into whatever position and get that, compact and as close as possible. To the right there, that red knuckle boom there, it has pretty big outriggers. The outriggers, I think, are 12 feet out from the truck. So if we're lifting a container, we have to try get it dead center of that outrigger to pick it up and then swing it around, or we try to get the container inside the outrigger because our back outriggers go straight down instead of out, kind of things. The main point is basically get your turret as close to either the bumper or the sides as possible with like the minimum. You want narrow outriggers. So some cranes you'll see, they're like great cranes and they're look like a good tonnage and everything, but the outriggers are way too long, and then by the time you reach out the side of it, you've lost your first 15 feet of capacity, right? So that's just kind of roughly kind of what I'm saying on that one.
Now, is that something that aftermarket you can kind of beef up if you're like, hey, my outrigger stretches out 15 feet, I really wish it was 10. If you went in and get it retrofitted, you're like is that something that's possible?
On the crane, right? Rigger, full outrigger, quarter outrigger, depending on the crane, correct? I mean, that's how our cranes are, anyways.
Yeah, stability of it. Like I just don't know. Like if you just put on a beefier one, like a more of an upgraded.
No, it's pretty tough. Like say on a knuckle boom or something like that. Like they want it, they engineer it that way. So they either do it mid outrigger, full outrigger, right? They don't want to be beefing stuff up because then it's like not.
It's not the manufacturer's spec.
Yeah, the manufacturers won't like that, right? So that you'll have a hard time getting that engineered. Another thing to watch out for when you guys are buying trucks is that it's 360.
Yep.
You don't want like a different chart out the side. It's just going to be a pain in the ass, or a different chart out the front. You want to make sure that truck is tested 360. So a lot of times, they got a front outrigger, but that'll just like as just like a longevity thing. You'll end up getting rid of that truck if you don't have 360, because you'll get in so many situations where you're forced into a corner. That's the only spot to set up a crane. And then you don't want to be going over your weak side because the chart sucks over your side, right? So it's like you can't just disconnect every time and do it out the rear.
So let me ask you this. What was your company's decision why you guys bought boom trucks over like an AT?
Okay. So my dad started the business and he ran like 200 tons, different things like that. But when he started, he started with a 17-ton boom truck with 17 or 70 feet of boom. Then they came in up here and they said, okay, now everyone needs to be certified. So what happens is he only had a 17-ton, so he could only get recertified and grandfathered in on a 40-ton and under. So that's kind of why we chose boom trucks, because we were limited by the ticket. Sorry.
Okay.
But as far as like boom trucks, like RTs, you're talking about rough terrains, like
I was saying ATIC, all terrains. I know RTs, you would need a low boy, you need to haul it and everything like that.
yeah. So the thing with RTs is, like you said, you're hauling it everywhere, and then it's stuck on a job, right? So even though they're not working for a week, it's still stuck there, and you're like, oh, I could do a job somewhere else, right? But then you're stuck to those long-term jobs as well, that it's like 6 months at a time. So we just find those go up and down with the economy too much. And, we find the risk here with the long-term jobs. The short-term jobs where you're getting, one or two jobs, 3 jobs on a busy day, but they're all small a day kind of thing, are more guaranteed. And then you can kind of be a chameleon. You can go to commercial, residential as well. So it's just kind of, I would say it's a safer option. Going RT right away, it would be a hard job, like kind of start to a business, unless you got a contact in the industry. I was like, hey, I do steel work. If you want to be my main crane guy and you get an RT, and then we'll do all the steel work, you do all the crane work, dude, start with an RT. But unless you have a connection like that, it's pretty risky, right? Nothing's guaranteed. And then uniqueness. We'll go back down to our cranes here. So this 40-ton, it's a 40-ton Manitex, 124 feet of boom. We were the second people in the Lower Mainland to have that crane back in like 2016 or something. So I find buying a unique crane that's kind of newer. At the time, it was like a few years old. We try not to buy brand new trucks. So we usually buy them like, 3, 4, 5 years in, when they depreciate quite a bit, but they're still like worked in and they're good trucks. Same with the 80-ton on the left here. There's only 3 of those in the Lower Mainland here. So we live in a pretty big market. There's probably a good, 50 crane companies in our area if you count all the small guys. There's a lot of cranes. So we try to be that second, third crane in when a newer style crane comes, just because you're at such an advantage. So the older style 40 tons had 100 feet of boom. They would have to put a jib on to reach 124 feet, where we can just pump it out with our main boom. So when you have an advantage like that, that pays off big time for your first truck. And then transport's a big one. Your customer's always going to want the materials brought to site. So they don't really want to phone 2 people when they're used to phoning one crane company for the material. So like you can see on this left, this guy's got a bit of a deck for roofing, whatever materials, maybe a 20-foot container on there. So you either want to supply that and have like a good freight truck company and partner kind of thing if you go into the stiff booms, or you want to buy trucks with decks on it, so you can actually, or trailers that can pull trailers to haul out those materials, which is a big one. So another big tip is to compare charts. So for that 40-ton Manitex, there's Alltech, there's Elliott, and there's National that make the same 40-ton style crane, similar boom lengths. But Alltech and Elliott have way weaker charts. If you compare all the charts, the Manitech chart has way better capacity. So you could see it, a decent deal on a all tech 40 ton. And then, when you actually put it to work, people are like, hey, I thought this was a 40 ton. What do you mean it can't reach, 100 feet, with like 900 pounds, right? You'll start to run into kind of complications that way. So I always compare whatever crane you're going to get, compare it to all the other manufacturers to see which one has the best chart. And you want to pick that one, right? And then also like attachments. Attachments are huge, like just pallet forks for roofing. If it comes with a jib, make sure all the jib, you set it up with the jib on when you're buying it, just to make sure everything's working. And baskets are huge to open yourself up to more work. And then like what we had HVAC dollies. So when we had smaller cranes before our 40 and 80 ton, we used to have these dollies that we'd pick up and put to roof for any AC unit that we can reach. And then they could dolly it over. It had mechanical lifters, so little hydraulics to pick it up, put it down on the curb. That way we could pick up a lot more work that was out of our reach, right? So just different little attachments. There's ones like I saw for glass, where it had the suction cups on it. It was like this big spreader bar with counterweights on it. So it can actually go underneath buildings and then stick that glass maybe 5-10 feet underneath the edge of a building, like a canopy or something, right? So once you hear like the glass industry hears, oh, this crane guy has this specialty part, word spreads around like crazy, and then you end up taking over that industry because you have that one attachment, right? So think about that as well going forward. Do you guys have any questions on kind of trucks and setup?
Well, yeah, like the problem is which one is kind of being more busier, because the moment you get anything really above 40 ton, you're not going to have a flat deck anymore.
No.
You're doing a trailer, right? So like, is it which one's more in need, which one's kind of more busy? Like, there's a toss up. Like, yeah, I understand a lot of people want their container picked up from the shipyard and dropped off on site, but is that every day someone's going to want that, or is it better to get the higher tonnage to get stuff that not everybody can do, right?
Yeah. So I always try to stay above the, because even a container, a lot of those are cash jobs, and you get the cheap kind of residential guys being like, hey, I'll give you $500. It's like, well, I charge twice that, so you want to stay away from that kind of, even the container industry, we call them mystery boxes, where it's like the guy says, oh yeah, it's empty, you go there, it's full of stuff, and it's like, I can't even pick it up, right? So I find container industry I would stay away from.
Okay.
Personally. And then, so I would stay away from a knuckle boom, because knuckle booms are like low hanging fruit, right? It doesn't take a lot of skill to operate one. And then because it doesn't take a lot of skill and they're the cheaper style of crane, a lot of people have them. So stiff booms in our area are the way to go because less people have them, and there's just a ton of work for them. So like you can do a hot tub out at 100 feet for 40 ton, or 90 feet. So you can do that residential. You can do trusses on a big house that the smaller truss cranes can't do. You got to call in a 40 ton to 80 ton. For
So
your first, go ahead.
You're going to the point. I was gonna say, for the first crane, would you suggest a 40 ton with a deck or like an 80 ton for each?
So the first crane, I wouldn't buy anything over 90 ton, because that once you start getting the 120s and then like 200 tons, all that kind of stuff, it's obviously a massive price jump. It's also, you need relief trucks, you need riggers and stuff like that. You're going to be a one-man show to start off with. So stick 100% under a 90 ton crane. Don't buy anything over a 90 ton, and then I would stick with the boom truck. So anything from 40 ton to 90 ton, I would buy as your first crane, because that way you're actually making good money on an hourly rate. Where once you get into the smaller trucks, the knuckle booms and the flat decks, even the small boom trucks, you got to work twice as much and keep that truck rolling to make good cash with it, right? So, and that's pretty hard to do, especially when you first start off and you're trying to get customers, right? So at least with the 40 tons to 80 tons, it's got a good hourly rate. Even though it's sitting a bit at the start, you're still making money, good money when it's working. Like the profit margins are way better. And you can still pick up, a 40 ton for a similar price as a really nice knuckle boom, right? But the knuckle boom is charged half the hourly rate.
What's the hourly rate over there? You know what I mean asking.
So for like a 40 ton, it's around 265 an hour plus, like we say 10% fuel. So like say 285 kind of thing an hour, plus taxes. And then our 80 ton charges at 450 an hour. And that would be on the high side. So there's a lot of older 80 tons in our area that can charge out like 330, 350. So we're like quite a bit higher than a lot of people. And that's just because our truck itself is just a better truck. We don't have a dolly. It's a lot lighter than the older style. So because we don't have a dolly, we can set up right away into position. We don't have to, put the counterweights on, disconnect from the dolly, and then reset up in position with the counterweights on, right? So we don't want to have that advantage plus be cheap at the same time, right? So what about you, Matt? Like, do you know how much like an 80 ton would charge out in your area?
I don't know the market here since I've mostly it's all specialty work, where I'm at, and it's, we do HVAC units. We also do multi-million-dollar CNC machines and lace and like very specialty equipment, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's foreign territory to me, actually, jumping out and doing residential, whenever I plan to do that. I mean, pulling levers is one thing, but the business side, is a whole other monster.
Yeah, the business side is a whole nother monster. That's why I kind of say the limiting factors getting your first truck is, the financial is usually the big one, then confidence, right? Getting in there, getting your business set up for success. And go ahead.
So I have someone that they're multimillionaire, right? They're a good friend of mine. They said they'd want to, if I did decide to do something, they'd be a silent partner, and they would do like a 70-30 split. So they'd finance everything, for 30%, and then 70% would be me running it, starting the crane business, all that. Do you think that's a fair way to start, or would you ease off something like that?
Yeah, I always kind of say stay away from partnerships in the crane industry. I see just a lot of them break up. But those are mostly like 50-50 partnerships where it's like, hey, let's buy cranes together, start a business. What happens is a lot of people kind of say, hey, I want to go this direction. I want to buy this crane. And then they just, a lot of crane partnerships break up. If he's going to be a silent partner, I would try to keep it as small a percentage as possible. Because when you do start making money, what'll happen is like, man, I'm giving up that 30% and I'm doing all the work, right? So a lot of guys that are slaving away, running the business, working 70-hour weeks in summer are get kind of resentful. And sometimes it's like, it's better to do more of like, I'll pay you out over time, or like you can take a wage out of it. Is sometimes a better way to go than 30% isn't bad. If it was like 40-50 split, I would stay away from that, because it's pretty disheartening to, working your butt off and then, 50% of the profits are gone. Right? So, just be super careful with partnerships. Yeah, it's a tough one. What's your thoughts on that, Jim?
Like I said, I actually have another small business on my own, so I'll be able to fund it. But one thing I learned about being in business is if it takes you an extra 6 months to save up that extra bit of money it takes to get your foot in the door to secure it yourself, it's well worth taking that extra 6 months and just coming up with that capital, right? So I'm an OE member as well. So if you're already in a union job and you got a check coming in, and if it's just a matter of, a few months so you can get qualified for yourself, then if the only thing that person's bringing to the table is money, but they're not bringing any contracts, any work, any, mechanic experience or anything like that, then it's not really worth having a joint venture, in my opinion.
Yeah, especially when you start succeeding, right? A year, 2 years in, 5 years in, it's like, oh man, I signed up to give away that 30%, right? So it
Okay.
starts to wear on you eventually. It's nice, obviously, at the start because it takes a little bit the risk away, right? And sometimes going forward, it can be kind of nice because, like, hey, they might want to reinvest into the second crane, third crane, but I agree with Terry. It's just kind of, if you can do it yourself, that's just the best way to do it in the crane industry. I see a lot of guys breaking up with some hard feelings way. So basically, we'll kind of go through the price point and stuff pretty quick, but with the the nature of the crane business, there's a lot of money comes in and a lot of money goes out. So you want to make sure that we'll go on the revenue model inside. So you want to make sure that you do your research on kind of what the local rates are for that crane. And then you want to make sure that whatever financing or, that crane costs, you don't want to, have this high, massive payment or something that is hourly, bringing in 120, 150 an hour, right? You want to do your homework on that. And then, yeah, some cranes, like it'll be, a good crane, if you got a good setup, it'll be 40 to 60 hours, hours before you actually turn a profit that month, right? So you just gonna have to have that in mind that the first week and a half is going to be, you got to keep that truck rolling to get that work, or you're losing money that month, right? So it's tough at the start. You might lose a bit of money. The first year is always really tough, but as the economy grows, as word gets out, you will grow, and then it gets to the point where it's like, hey, I've grown to basically my max capacity, and it's time for another crane, right, to help out. So depreciation's a big one. That's why I always buy trucks that are like 4 years old, kind of thing, around there. Because, for example, the guy that bought the 80-ton, it's a crossover 8,000. He bought it for over $1 million, and then 4 years later, we bought the same crane for 500,000, right? So we got it for half the price. 4 years later, it's just best. There's no point in spending that kind of money, right? Because that guy probably hasn't even paid off 500,000 of the crane yet, or maybe has. He's pretty good at business. But also for tax purposes and all that, you want a crane that depreciates. The nice thing about getting a used crane is the previous company has already set it up with like kind of pads and chain holders and everything like that. That's a pretty big cost that guys don't think about. But yeah, there's obviously like the insurance. You want to do your research on how much insurance is, how much licenses are, and rigging. It could be $5,000 to rig out the truck and pads and everything like that, right? So calculate all your monthly costs and see how much hourly work that you have to get to break even and make a profit there. A big one we've kind of covered is like that fuel consumption. Make sure you're not, you're getting the 60-ton work for 60-ton crane, right? You're not doing the 30-ton and running around doing small jobs and burning fuel like crazy with a big truck. Another thing is make sure that you buy a crane that the manufacturer has like a dealer close to you guys so that you can get parts. So some guys buy these cranes like, oh, I got it for a good price, but the next dealer is like 5 hours away from them, and then to get parts shipped out and parts now have to come from the East Coast and all these different things. Now you're down for a couple of days just because there's no local dealers or no parts close to you. So getting the popular brands like Manitex, Hiab, National, they usually have dealers all over the place, right? So another one is getting connections with mechanics. So if you guys have one truck, you're just naturally going to be at a disadvantage when it comes to mechanics, right? Because they're going to put guys like us with 8 trucks above you and kind of service us and kind of put you on the back burner. So you want to make sure that you got, a good mechanic working for you that's not messing you around. And there's also, just a lot of mechanics that charged through the roof. And with the young guys these days, we've had problems where it's like we go to Western Star and these different big name kind of mechanics and shops, and then we drive home, there's loose bolts and our truck's falling apart because they didn't put things back together, right? So make sure those connections are pretty big in this industry. Those are the two kind of biggest connections for getting you going. Another thing to just prepare for is the downtime costs, right? So July to December is usually kind of the busy time for cranes. And then, January to April can be pretty slow. And then it can start to kind of pick up, just depending on the industries too. But just as, it's a weather thing, a lot of times, with the rain and even snow, there's a lot of delays in construction, right? So things kind of get delayed kind of in between those kind of times. So just be prepared for those downtimes, because a lot of guys kind of calculate the full year and say, oh, I've made this money, and kind of from July to December, it's going to keep on going, but it's not, right?
Your projected 40 to 60 hours, is that from July to December, or is that based on the 12 months?
Yeah, so that's basically just right up here, the 40 to 60 hours. That's kind of monthly. That's, you want to, before breaking a profit, you gotta be working that truck 40 to 60 hours every month.
That's based on 12 months, not the 9 months period, right?
Yeah. So every month you want to be doing that. So you have to kind of calculate, especially at the beginning, you might not be, January might be pretty slow, right? So we used to have to save up just to get through the winter, and then, start all over again, work when the work is there, right? Exactly. So another thing to watch out for is when you buy a truck is how many, can you get operators for it, right? So if you guys start with the boom trucks, you'll make more money, but what happens is it's harder to get operators to replace you. So you buy like that 80-ton, it takes quite a bit of skill to run an 80-ton, right? So the pool of operators are a lot smaller. You buy a knuckle boom, there's tons of guys to pick from, but there's also, the skill level is not great. There's also not a lot of, opportunity to move up in knuckle booms. They're all kind of the same. You pick stuff up, you put it down, you kind of constantly, loading your deck, offloading kind of thing, right? So where the stiff booms takes quite a bit of skill. And then as a result, they do more skilled jobs like steel, trusses, the tree removal. You can't really have a rookie doing those jobs, and they learn a lot slower, right? So with one of the perks of being in a competitive, say the HIAB is you can get your trucks for cheaper, and you can, the work out there's plenty of it, but you're kind of capped as far as hourly rate. But you can do kind of more like marketing and kind of start buying trucks and getting operators. And that's a quicker way of actually getting off the trucks and running like a fleet. Where if you go to the boom trucks, it's very hard for owners to get off the fleet because they're usually the best operator, right? And then they're constantly training these younger guys or these other operators on their trucks. And, so that's something to think about as far as what kind of truck you get. Another thing is like just, certification and licensing for that truck. Is that can you get sponsor guys to upgrade their ticket, right? If you find a good young guy that wants to upgrade. And then I always say like the boom trucks are good for, guys want to end up on a boom truck, right? They want to sit in the air conditioning. They want to sit in the heated cab. They don't want to get rained on. They also don't want to be rigging up, when they get to a certain kind of point in their career. So the boom trucks are like something to build on. So I'll show you just my fleet again down here. So we have the two HIABs on the right here, and we start guys on there because it's easy to get HIAB guys. So we start with HIABs. They already have the HIAB ticket, so they can jump on that crane and they can go straight to work because they know how to do it. So we'll slowly train them on these 22 tons. They got 80 feet of boom. So that's kind of their next jump up is an 80 foot of boom, but it's still like it's levers. So it's, they can get pretty rough and swing with it. So, or just kind of go slow and cautious, right? Which isn't great, but they're learning, right? We find that's an easier jump than going from a HIAB or even like a 22 ton to the 80 ton, right? The 80 ton's quite a bit of jump. There's a lot more to it, putting counterweights on. It just can be pretty overwhelming for younger guys or newer guys in the industry. That's kind of why we've set it up this way. Another thing is like we got our 22 tons. They do like the trusses, the rebar, a lot of air conditioning. So we have those, but see this HIAB has the exact same chart as the 22 tons, which helps us quite a bit, right? So we have, so this HIAB will actually bail out the 22 tons, even though it's got 67 feet of boom. The chart is very similar to the 22 tons when it comes to rebar, right? So it's always good to have relief trucks when you kind of get going. And then the red Fozzie there, so the second from the right, it's a relief truck for our 30 ton and our 40 ton. So the 30 ton has 112 feet of boom, and then the 40 ton has 120 feet of boom. So they can do all the far reaches. But if we have like a 40 ton job that is just, lifting a container, but it's quite heavy, our 30 ton can't do it. That red knuckle boom there, we'll send it to it as kind of a relief, so we can free up that 40 ton to do the long reaches, and then we do the heavy lifting with that. And then naturally what'll happen is you guys will buy a truck and you'll always need something above it, right? You'll never have a big enough truck. That's why it's always good to move up. Moving down is kind of, if you can avoid it, I would, because you're making less money and all that. So if you start at a 40 ton, I would continue moving up to like 80 tons and different things like that, not moving down to 22 tons. But do you guys have any thoughts on that as far as like setting up your fleet?
Well, I see, for us in particular, out of Edmonton, oil and gas, there's a lot of 60-ton trucks out of there. They're like dime a dozen, right? But then they're also like twin steer in the front, which I know is not good for like city work, turning radius and stuff like that. And then, I don't really know what's better between a Kenworth or a Western Star, or like, I kind of know, like, if there's a National or a Manatic or ATEC, or, I kind of know what booms are better, but like overall, like I just still not quite sure on what tonnage for having a deck or trailer, enclosed cab or levers, or like still a little bit cloudy on that, on what, but like what I would do the lower mainland here.
Yeah. So what the lower mainland needs is like, there's quite a few bigger, like from 100 tons to like 500 tons. There's actually a lot of big companies moved in. We got Mammoet, we got Sarens, we got Sterling, mainland 300. You got Mega. There's a ton of big cranes now, so that's actually starting to get competitive. Where that, like back in the day, it was like Will, Canton, and Eagle West were the three. Now there's 20 big crane companies. They're all kind of unions, so I wouldn't do anything in that section. Then you also have your knuckle booms, which is completely flooded, and people undercutting everyone, and it's kind of low hanging fruit. So we're actually in like the sweet spot. There's not too many guys running around with 22 ton stingers. You just won't see a lot. You won't see a lot of the 30 tons, and the 40 tons are starting to get pretty popular. There's probably maybe like 10 of those around, but a 50 ton, there's actually a rule in BC where you can derate a 50 ton to a 40 ton, and it still actually has the same chart as a 50 ton as far as like the reach. They just derate it a little bit close in, which doesn't really affect you because it's so close to you that it doesn't matter. Like you're picking up 10, 15 feet away from you, at the closest. So they derate that, first 15 feet to 40 ton rate. So that would be a really good crane around here. Anything with 120 plus feet of boom is needed. So if I were to buy my next crane, what I would get is there's a 45 ton Manitex, and it's got 142 feet of boom. And whoever gets that crane in the lower mainland here is gonna just take off, because there's such a market for it, because there's a lot of 40 tons, a lot of 50 tons, but they have 120 feet. So now, you always want to make sure that you're getting the next largest boom kind of thing. So, they used to make 40 tons with 100 feet of boom. So like those are basically dinosaurs now. Nobody buys a 40 ton with 100 feet of boom because it's just, you need that extra 20 feet. Everyone else has the extra 20 feet, right? So that's what everyone expects. That's what the market expects from you. So now what is happening is the 120 feet is getting short. So these newer trucks with the 140 feet are way more at an advantage, right? So, and the 45 ton, by the time, because anytime guys have like a longer boom, it will take your capacity out a little bit, right? Because the weight of it, that extra 20 feet. So your chart will be a little off. So if you get a 45 ton with 140 feet of boom, it's basically a 40 ton by the time the chart kind of relates. But that would be like a really good instant kind of crane to get going, especially in our area.
So where I work, we have a 75 ton Tadano, some all-terrain crane. So it has an upper and a lower cab. It has 171 foot of main. Counterweights right on the crane, so there's no need for a dolly or anything like that. And you can take them off with the crane. I know where I work, they paid $1.3 million for it. The used model, like a 2018, like an ATF, that would be probably in the range of like probably 600.
Yeah,
would you think that would be a smarter way to go? I mean, 'cause outrigger wise, it's 21 foot across, outrigger to outrigger.
Oh wow, that's pretty nice.
And it's 171 feet of main. Plus the jib's like 30 something feet. We don't use a jib that often where I'm at.
Yeah, they're usually around 32 feet kind of thing.
But would it be an advantage to start with something like that? That is because it has four-way steer and could get in tight areas, a little bit different than a boom truck. But would you try to go that big right away?
Absolutely, like 70, like I would say anything under 90, right? So 70 is in a perfect spot, especially like that boom is a very desirable boom. Like that alone is such an advantage that you have 170 feet of live boom. That reaches a lot of things.
Yeah,
so,
and we've flown people in man baskets doing lightning protection, the crazy stuff.
Yeah. So
but it's
that
stout.
boom,
Like the heaviest pick we've done is like 2,000 pounds.
Yeah. It's got the both, right? It's got the power and close for the big heavy lifts. So you can do, the machines, the big heavy containers, then, just the heavy lifts, which is nice. And close is, you can just back up to it, right? And you said you didn't need a dolly on it?
No.
Yeah. So that's you just back up to it, do the big heavy lifts up front. Plus, 170 feet when you back up to a building, you can reach pretty high or pretty far in, right? Which is awesome for those, like say those Walmart jobs where there's like 10 rooftop units going up and they just pull in a freight truck full of units and curb adapters. That way you can just pump them all up and reach way more than a crane with 140 feet or 120 feet, right? We have to set up multiple times or put a jib on. Most cranes, the nice thing about that one is most cranes need to put a jib on to reach what you can already reach. That's a nice crane, and that's what I'm talking about, finding those little advantages, right? So what will happen is other companies will start to use you and be like, hey, Matthew's got a 70 ton, it's got 170 feet of boom. I can't swing a jib because there's too many trees on the street, or there's power lines or something like that. I need something that can reach it without a jib. So then they're like, we have to call Matt. So that's once word gets out when you got a specialty crane like that, other crane companies will phone you, and then it's easy to find your own work as well because you have that advantage. Yeah. And what style was that you said?
Tadano. It's ATF 70G and like the letters after I forget, but it's a sweet crane.
Yeah, no, and Tadanos are pretty good trucks too, right? They that you've run them, they're pretty good trucks. So even a crane like that around our area, you just know that like once you start getting those, then the competitors start, hey, noticing like, hey, we need to get something like that, right? And that's kind of how the crane industry kind of develops. And, you know, everyone's competing over the longest boom and all these different advantages. Um, is there any other cranes that you kind of like? Because that 600,000 is pretty. That's not bad for you know, like a brand new knuckle boom is 600,000. That's not
Yeah.
a terrible price. It's still pricey for your first crane. Is there like backup options that you'd think of, or?
Boom trucks, you know, that would be if I could find one of the $200,000-$300,000 range, you know.
Yeah.
But that would be my question, you know, would you start with a smaller boom truck and then work up to try to buy because I'm familiar with that crane, that's why I brought it up.
Yeah, yeah. It's yeah, based on financial is like the biggest decision. You know, are you stretching yourself? You don't want to stretch yourself then and just to afford this big crane and then, you know, be slow at the start and sink your ship pretty early, right? So it's always best to go a little bit safer at the start, your first crane. So I kind of like starting, you know, at the 40 ton, you know, 50 ton range, and then you can always go up, you know, to your next biggest, you know, buy an 80 ton or a 70 ton, like you said, and then you know, once you start getting employees and different things, like you can get into the bigger cranes, it's a lot easier.
Okay.
What's it like for like, say, if you went to that 70 ton, you know, are you getting riggers with you, or is it just you and the customer putting jibs on and different things like that, rigging out counterweights?
It would probably just be me for now. I mean, I could, you know, I work with a bunch of iron workers, but it would be finding work through, you know, bigger jobs, I guess.
Yeah. So say if that 70 ton went out and you're working for Barnhart or whatever, do they send that out with a rigger at all, or is it just you all the time?
Like Barnhart, bigger companies send out their riggers.
They do, yeah. Yeah. So that's one thing you got to be careful for. If you buy a 70 ton like that and all the customers that you show up to basically, oh, where's your rigger, right? And it's just you. It kind of can put some tension there where it's like, oh, it went slow because I had to take one of my guys to help you demobilize.
Because footprint wise, it's about the same size as your 80 ton. And does your company send out riggers, or how do you guys do it?
So for the most part, we don't run it. I usually run that crane for the most part. The odd time when we're putting a jib on, there is like some like a hill set up with a jib, you know, and you know, we can't swing the jib because of power lines. We bring another crane and stuff. So there is, I do bring a rigger on some tough jobs with the 80 ton on the hill setup. It just kind of, sometimes it takes the two people, especially on a tricky one with power lines and you're swinging the jib. It's like you don't want to have some, you know, customer basically telling you how close you are to power lines, right? Sometimes you can't trust. You know, they give you the youngest guy so that everyone else can work, and you got some guy that doesn't really tell you or have the confidence to be like, hey, you know, watch out for this, you know. So it is that way, like with the 40 tons and stuff like that, you don't put the jib on very often. So it is nice to start with the smaller boom trucks, work your way up when you start getting a bit of help and employees and you know, a bit of customers too, right? It's easier to pick up that bigger crane work. But it's definitely doable. I know a guy, he jumped from a high ab, did lumber, you know, was making like 20 grand profit a year. And he's like, this is stupid, you know? So he jumped up to an 80 ton, and he's done very well for himself. It's a big learning curve for him, but yeah, he did good. What about you, Terry? Are you closer to kind of figuring out? Like, I wouldn't go with, you know, those Alberta trucks that you're talking about. So another thing is you got to keep an eye out for wheelbase. When you start to bring those longer wheelbases down here and just trying to turn around the corner, getting into sites. If you show up with this big Alberta oil rig crane to a site, guys will be like, man, you're not getting that in here. You know, you gotta, you know, jackknife it or take 10, you know, turns into it. You know, guys will get pretty frustrated pretty quick, especially when you're starting a business. You basically don't want your truck letting you down. So your truck has to be as good as you, right? So you're going to be the best asset and the selling point for your business, but your truck also has to be like, hey, you know, this is a good truck, good operator, call us back, right? If they start to get, it's like, oh, that's a good guy, but his truck is a pig.
Yeah.
it's simple, letting them down.
What's your thoughts on boom trucks with cabs for the operator? Because it rains a lot here, and sitting outside all day in the rain sucks. But it also hopping in and out of that, if you're kind of doing things on your own, could be kind of weary, right?
Yeah. So guys always appreciate the cabs. They always, when we get guys trained up on the high ab and the smaller cranes, they always are like, oh, I want to go in the 40 ton, I want to go in the 30 ton, I want to go in the 80 ton, oh, you all get all these comments, oh, you look so cozy in there, bored kind of thing. It's like, by far, once you start getting into cabs, guys love it. So if they have to jump out of it, they would rather jump in and out of a cab than sit in the rain or in the heat, right? So cabs are the way to go. That's why we kind of did the smaller cranes to warm them up to the bigger cranes, because there's a skill level there, right? So so the cabs are no brainer. It's almost like a reward. Like Matt does not, if he bought a high ab and had to rig up in the mud, all winter, Matt wouldn't be happy, right? Like it's just kind of, he's been running these bigger cranes, with the luxury of a cab, right? You don't want to go backwards.
Exactly. No, I'm used to it. Like very used to it.
But even like the clavicle cranes and stuff, I've been in the 1,800 tons, everything's all in the cab, these are all lattice cranes. But like I always have a rigger and stuff like that too. But and I did work with the pedestal cranes. I had a remote control, and I'd be able to hook something up and then fling it up, and that by myself, right? But just trying to figure out because if I buy something, it's definitely going to be me in the seat for the first year for sure, probably the first 2 years,
sure.
right? It also got to be something that I gotta want to wake up in the morning and see the weather and be like, fuck me, right?
So what hours are you looking at? Like if you're buying a used crane, what's you're going by year, but what's the maximum hours you would, be willing?
I would stay under 10, at least 10,000, because even that's kind of probably like an 8-year-old crane, right? That's got 10,000 on it. Always make sure that the engine and the crane hours match, because sometimes one of the engine's being redone and has less hours, right? So that's one red flag to look out for. But stay under 10. If you can get one, around 4 or 5, that's usually a broken in crane, and it's been worked, because even the new cranes now, they have tons of leaks at the beginning, and they have tons of going back to the dealer and getting things tweaked, if you buy a brand new crane. So I say the first 6 months of it and the year of a brand new crane is just as bad as having an old one. So if you can get one that's worked in, that's the best way to go. So try to stick around 4. Once you get to 10, then it's like, hey, I got only maybe another 5 to 8 years left in it, and then it's toast, right? Once they get to 18, 20, they're pretty toast. They're getting shipped down. Like we sell some of our cranes down to Mexico, and they like the older pre-emission stuff, right? So but so the less hours the better for sure. That's huge. I'll go through this inspection. Main thing, this might seem like common sense, but never buy something blind. Never buy something out of an auction, especially your first crane. You just cannot do it. You need to be on that crane. You need to operate it, and you need to see if you feel it. Like we have had cranes where it's like we went to go buy them, and then the chart is sucked over the side, and we're already tipping with no weight, and we're like, what's going on here? It's it's not 360. It's this no good to us. We have had cranes where it's like, we're operating, and the swing is loose on it, so the boom is kind of choppy going back and forth, and it makes a good operator look terrible. So it's like that's not even an option. So make sure that you guys are there. If you're not mechanically inclined, make sure that you're got like a truck inspection guy there, even a crane inspection guy, when to meet you there. You want to test out the outrigger stability. So if you can get a lock block or something, heavy weight and just do that, a foot off the ground or 8 inches and go 360 with that crane in like an open yard, right? Just to make sure that it's not tippy at some points. And then also just, heat up the crane, make sure that you get it nice and hot and make sure that it's not gonna, isn't leaking like crazy. Some of these older cranes are just, it's puddle is left under every job, right? And then it's got 10 different leaks and you got to go, fix that. You can't bring it onto someone's driveway or any decent job site, right? They're really cracking down on that hydraulic leaking and different things like that with the environmental stuff. And so checking every weld, get an inspection done. If you're not there for the inspection, make sure that it's not the crane, whoever's selling the crane, getting the inspection kind of done for you. Make sure you phone your own guy in the area and be like, hey, I need a signature saying that you stand by this inspection, because we've had guys that have bought cranes and then it's been, fudged a bit and their buddy, just kind of said, oh yeah, it's good to go, slap on a sticker. And, by the time they get it, it's like, this would never pass an inspection around here. Like what, you just inspected it 2 weeks ago. How is this, around? So you do have to be careful in the industry because some guys do have good connections that can really mess you up. And then also make sure that like the truck is legal. So Canada up here, they're a lot stricter than in the States. Well, some states are pretty strict, but with weight, like wheelbase distance and different things like that, you got to be really careful. It might be legal down in the States, but when you bring it across, it might just take one look at it and be like, no, you can't make that legal here. So that's a pretty big one. Obviously, you don't want to have to resell a truck you just bought. And then, so the main thing is the front, the weight on the front axles are usually a little bit over or a lot over, depending on the different regulations. So red flags that I never even look at a truck. It's just kind of, so no valid commercial truck inspection. If it's just been sitting there and hasn't been inspected, I don't even bother buying it. That's a red flag to begin with. I only buy trucks that are running in guys' fleets or kind of at a dealership and the guys are selling it, from a trade-in, but it's been running. Same with the crane inspection. If it's got no valid crane inspection, don't even bother. You'll get lots of those cranes and they're tempting because the price is always tempting. It's like, oh, I can fix it up or I'll whatever, I'll go run it and it runs good. But then when you actually put it to work, the day to day, it's letting you down, right? When you start a business, you can't have a truck letting you down. It's just not a good look. Obviously, not good for picking up new customers. And then also like service records. If the guy, can't give you service records for that truck, that there's usually a type of person that owns cranes that, aren't organized and don't have that kind of stuff. That's a red flag too, where it's just like, hey, if you can't show me the paperwork of what's been done, it's just a red flag. You don't want to trust those guys. And another one is do not buy an auction truck. So Ritchie Brothers, whatever auction. Lots of good trucks, I always call them. They look good from far, but far from good. So when you get up close and then check underneath them, they don't look like the pictures on the internet. It's a little bit harder too to test them out in the auctions. They're always, very tempting. But for your first truck, get one that is in a fleet and somebody is selling it so that they, there's lots of crane companies that sell, around 4,000 hours, 5,000 hours. We've had it, warranties up. Now we're dumping it and buying a brand new truck, right? There's lots of cranes like that. So that's kind of the ones we go after. And then we also buy from California a lot. Most of our cranes are from California. Because California has pretty strict emissions rules. So a lot of good cranes are now getting kicked out of California for that reason. Not because they're terrible cranes, just as California just is so strict. So these guys are forced to sell their trucks. Another one is because the climate, it's not rusty, right? So when you get that crane, it's in pretty, mint condition. It might be 6 years old, but it looks like 2 years old, right? That's a big one where like, when we go to Alberta, so Alberta's, about 10, 15 hours away from us. For your reference, kind of a bit more east, but it's just, the rust, the trucks are just rusted out. And then if they sit for 6 months, a year while they're getting sold, they just rust like crazy. So that's a big one. Once something rusts and it's sitting for a while. All those hydraulic seals, you can guarantee if a truck's been sitting, the hydraulic seals and the coolant seals, all those are gone, right? It just turns brittle, dries out, and cracks. And then those are the worst breakdowns to have, right? The hydraulic ones when you're can't even fold up your outriggers because it's pissing hydraulic fluid everywhere.
The prices are good though. That's the
I know. It's so tempting. If you're looking like Facebook, G Brothers, some of these prices like, oh, that's a good crane for 150,000 or 250,000. Like, oh, that could get me a good hourly rate. But if they're, there's a reason why they're in the auction, right? Somebody does not want to take the time to sell it, or they don't want to be dealing with like, hey, it's like as you as a buyer, it's like, hey, it's got hydraulic leaks everywhere. Like, what the heck? You sold me this thing that's in good condition. People don't want to deal with it. It's not put in an auction.
Is there anything you specifically try to buy off of, or whenever you like look on the internet for cranes, or like what do you?
Yeah, so for the most part, like Crane Network is a big one. I think it's free, so people can post, like kind of your average guys can post, where the other ones you have to pay for ads. So then you get more of the bigger companies and the more higher priced trucks instead of just like the privatized ones. So I like Crane Network, but it's just kind of, Iron Planet, them all kind of going around. And you gotta, like I said, you gotta look at your market, then kind of pick a crane, and then you gotta do your research on that crane. That could take you, it took us a year to buy that 80 ton. And we we were looking for a year until we found a good price that we were happy with, and a good truck too, right? There's lots of decent prices out there, but a truck that won't let you down, that can really, escalate your fleet to an add, be a good addition is huge, right? So any more questions kind of on the...
So you guys tow trailers behind all your trucks?
So everyone except the 80 ton. So our 30 ton and our 40 ton can pull a 30-foot spindle hitch, which is nice because it's low. It's 3 feet high, right? So we can put high stuff on there. It's also right behind the cab too, right? So you can pick heavy stuff, containers, machines off your deck, and go from there. So I find trailers are big because obviously, one, it gets the materials to site, and then second of all, and also a lot of guys, don't want to pull trailers. Like a lot of guys, like their licensing up here, it's just easier to get a class 3, which is basically just your truck license, right? So there's less and less people pulling trailers. So that opens up the market to make more money, basically. So that's why we pull trailers. And then you can, for our truck, that 22 ton down here, we have a pin deck on it. So it's, I think, 16 feet, goes over our fifth wheel. We put it on, get it on there in 10 minutes, take it off in 10 minutes. And we can throw some AC units on it. Because sometimes the HVAC guys don't like you coming in with the trailer, right? You're blocking, a strip mall or someone's driveway, stuff like that. So, that's been a really, really good addition. But all the rest of our trucks pull trailers, and we find because of that, we are in a better market than just flat deck. There's tons of flat decks out there. It's way too flooded.
Yeah, so I have my class 1, so towing a trailer is not an issue. But and then because you wouldn't be able to disconnect from your trailer and then get closer to it for a pick, though, right? Like it wouldn't really be many stores where you wanted to do that, though, right? Like
no, we do that. You like say you're doing trusses, and it's a new construction, say you reverse your trailer in, the front kind of yard, which is just gravel and mud because it's new construction, then you disconnect, then you pull in beside it. That way truck and trailer are on the right side of the power lines, closer to the house, right? Or containers, if it's a big heavy container, you pick it up, the container on your right side, swing it over to your left side, put on the trailer. And, so there's lots of applications. You get into tricky sites, right? You gotta drop the trailer, get closer to it. So that's somewhat common. You try to get it. Sometimes you can just jackknife it so it's even closer to the crane. and then you can pick it closer, right? There's lots of different applications for the trailers.
How does insurance work in terms of tonnage? Like, is there a big difference in owning a 50 ton versus a 40 ton?
Not really, no. It would be a bit different on like, so fleet insurance would save you quite a bit of money when you get
Yeah.
like 3, 4 trucks compared to just single. And then that way you're covered for anyone to drive it. So that's where the insurance kind of really picks up, and you save a bit of money once you switch to fleet insurance. But for the most part, it's like hook insurance and then like your load insurance or whatever, when you're driving, if you damage something on your deck, and then obviously truck insurance kind of thing. So it's just kind of one of those necessary evils. But yeah, insurance isn't like, I would say fuel and mechanics are your two biggest bills. Like I think we spent 200,000 last year on our mechanic bills for 7 trucks, and that's a little bit higher than normal because our guys were a little bit rougher last year on our trucks, which kind of sucked. But that's just kind of So at that point, you're almost better at getting a personal mechanic for your trucks. We're almost at the position where it's like, hey, if we just hire a guy for 100 grand, and then that way he can work on all our trucks and we're down for less time. We buy parts, obviously that's the other 100 grand, but we're at that point. But yeah, and then yeah, so you also got to pick like what style, like you guys are buying your first truck, but are you going to hire owner operators, to sign on with you for your second truck? You don't need to buy a second truck outright. You'll make more money, but it's maybe higher maintenance to have an employee, right? So sometimes you can just have an owner operator fleet, or you own maybe 3 trucks and then the other 2 or 3 are owner operators for less risk and stuff. There's also like the crane broker, which is basically you're the guy on the phones, and then you're basically setting up all the job scheduling and taking in the jobs, and then giving it out to other guys or your own cranes, and taking the percentage. And then there's like the crane business owners, which I personally recommend having your own fleet, and that you make way more money and it's less headache, right? So but yeah, it's just basically define your vision first, then kind of buy the equipment to support that vision. What style of company you want, what markets you want to be in, and then buy the truck to support that. I'll give you just like a little rundown here real quick. I've just my 10 top tips or 7 top tips. Focus on what the crane can do. There's going to be a ton of temptation and a ton of calls where like, I don't have the right size crane. Oh, I can't do that. And guys get pretty down on themselves pretty early, where it's like, oh man, I had 10 calls that I couldn't do and I had 3 that I could do. So it's you just have to focus on what industries and what your crane strengths are, and focus on those, and the work will come. Another one is don't start off cheap. If you guys kind of go into an industry and say, hey, I'm going to do like 20 hours less or $20 less an hour, and what'll happen is you'll attract all the really cheap guys that don't want to pay their bill and they're a complete headache to work for. You'll end up also just kind of pissing off the rest of the crane industry too, where they don't want to work with you right away. It's like, oh, I like that now. So it's like, so it's good to just stay at what the market rate, whatever that is. Sometimes it's, it fluctuates. So just kind of pick in the middle to start. But you do not want to start off cheap. It always backfires, and you get the guys that don't want to pay their bills. They're nickel and dime you for every penny. That's the kind of customers you attract by being cheap. So if you overextend yourself on big payments of your truck, the temptation is, oh, I need work. I'll just do it for whatever price, right? And give the power to the customer. Once you give that power to the customer, it's very hard to take it back. And then when you do raise your prices, they all leave you for the next cheapest guy, because they're only with you for the cheapest rate. So there's no loyalty or anything there. So that's a common mistake. And then find your worth. So if you think about it, all your future customers are actually have a crane company that they use right now. So you have to now replace them and try to replace them. So I say you have to find your worth and be worthy. Why would somebody use you over, the guys that they use right now, right? So for you guys, like a main thing would be like, hey, when I show up to site, it's going to be me. If you go with all these bigger union companies, You might get a guy, good guy one day and a terrible operator the next day, and they don't care. You're just a number, right? So it's a lot more personal. You'll attract, smaller companies, which is good, that would rather, a personal relationship with their crane operator. So, but just, yeah, be that good, have a good truck, operate well, be efficient, and you'll get clients that way, right? So be worthy of working with, and then getting that strong connection. So get strong connections for buying trucks, for financing, for mechanics, for subbing out work. You want to be able to keep a bit of work that you can't do, right? Say summertime you're swamped, you want to sub out the work that you can't do, so that in wintertime when you're slow enough to do the work, you still have that customer, right? And you got to get that connection where it's like, hey, I work with this other company and they work with me because we trust each other. There's a lot of kind of snaky people in the industry, but if you find guys that you can trust, it'll be huge.
Do you walk down every job? Do you walk down every job that you're going to be doing a pick for, or do you kind of figure out what the job is over the phone?
Yeah, so big thing is doing it over the phone. You want to ask like the important questions. What's the radius? What's the weight? Can I get close to the building, or is there, parked cars, or, so you want to establish the radius. Some customers, that work with cranes all the time, they'll be like, hey, I need 40-ton, give me the 40-ton, which is an easy call. But there's a lot of problem solving, especially like residential, where they're like, hey, I have a hot tub. I've never dealt with a crane before. It's like, okay, well, a lot of times we'll go on Google Maps, and see, okay, well, we can't set up in your driveway. It's a one lane kind of, driveway. So a lot of those residential ones can be a bit more high maintenance because you actually might have to do a site inspection because they have no idea what cranes are. So you have to go there, measure it out, be like, yeah, I can reach it. Google Maps is and the measure distance is huge for, like, a lot of times I'll look at it before I even go to a site or commit to a site inspection. Like, oh man, it's 200 feet away or something. I'm important, I can't do it. Here's somebody else that can, right? So but asking the right questions is huge. So yeah, weights, radiuses, obstructions, power lines, suspended slabs, all that kind of stuff. And that'll come, because you're already a crane operator, so you already kind of know what you need in that situation. Those questions all come kind of second nature to you, so that you don't go to a job and not be able to do it because you didn't ask the right question, right? That part you'll catch up pretty quick.
Then another question I had: what do you expect to make as an owner operator? Running, just say mean, or the lowest, highest,
Yeah. So with this, like the high ab down here that we have, roughly like 250 to 300,000 a year. I would say 60 to 80% of that, or 60 to 80,000 is profit. That's with the high ab. That high ab in the past is charged out like a 150 an hour. We just upped our rates to 165 again an hour, or it might even be more expensive now. We've upped our rates 2 or 3 times last like 3 years now. So that's on, but you got to keep those trucks rolling, right? It does quite a bit of work to make 250 to 300,000 sales. So the 40-ton, it does almost the same, but the profit is way more, right? It's 100,000 plus profit for like 450,000 say a year, and that's not it rolling as much as the high up kind of thing. So that's the nice thing about getting into the boom trucks, and whatever is hourly charging more is it's less pressure. You obviously want to stay busy, but it's less pressure to make that profit back, right? And then the 80-ton, we charge it at 450 an hour, and the profit margin's like 40-something% on it. So it's pretty good. But at the start, depending on your truck payment, that's the one that really sucks the profit percentage, right? So if you can get a good either savings or like a low interest rate, so that your financing isn't killing you like 10-15,000 a month, just for your truck, you'll start to make profit a little bit faster kind of thing. So
When you speak about profit, is that after paying for a driver?
yeah, it is. So that's all. That's that mechanic,
Wages.
fuel, everything, insurance, and so that's why the boom trucks, we like them because it's, the profit margins are way better. We're a little bit higher just because we've paid off all our trucks, right? So we're pushing like 43%, where most guys are lower than that. And then just depending, like, we know high up guys, like I said, like that example of that guy, he makes 20,000. It's just a lumber truck. He just throws it to the lumber yard and they basically book it out all year, but only makes 20,000 profit, which is not even worth it. What's the point of, invested into certain stock or something at that point? And
that's just something you're just keeping it alive for somebody else at that point.
Yeah.
Right?
You're giving somebody a job, to work and paying his wage, right? So you do have to be careful because the profits can leak out pretty good on mechanics, on different, you get a rough driver on your crane, and they're smashing into things and insurance is going up and, damaging and stuff like that. Or just inefficiency where you kind of, we know guys that their crane yards are half an hour, 45 minutes away from everybody. So they have to now drive that half an hour, 45 minutes and then start travel time because it's unfair. Why would somebody charge, double the travel time, right? So having a yard and a place to park it in a good area is a huge money saver. And pretty important. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you do like, I'm assuming there's like mandatory call out hours? Sure. Was that typically like a 4-hour call out or something?
Yeah, so everything, our boom trucks, 30 ton and up are 4 hours minimums. And then our smaller trucks are 3-hour minimum. And even that, like there's a lot of guys still at 3-hour minimums for even the bigger trucks, and it's crazy to us, but we try to stay with the skilled labor kind of stuff, specialty stuff, to just stay away from those guys and compete with that. And for the most part, the jobs are 4-hour. Like you end up using over 3 hours anyways.
The 4 hour, that would include the travel time, or the 4 hour plus that?
No, so travel times in that 4 hours. So say it takes you an hour to site, and then all they have is 2 hours on site to get the job done because it's an hour back, right? Yeah. So charge travel time both ways. If you don't do that, people will love you, but your profits won't, right? So you'll lose a lot of money. It's just an industry standard.
Yeah.
That travel time is a part of it.
Yeah, no, it's always best if everybody's calling around getting the same number, you want to be consistent. You don't want highs and lows because then somebody's going to feel like they're getting ripped off or whatever, So consistency is king.
Yeah, and being honest too is key. There's a lot of dishonest guys in the crane business, kind of overcharging and stuff like that, and it's just always, the truth always comes out, and then all of a sudden the customer ghosts you and you haven't seen him in 6 months, right? We had one guy, he thought we charged them 17% fuel when ours were 10%, or I think at that time was 7%. But the guy that set up the job that we went through, so he was kind of the middleman, he put 10% on the job, but he put it as our fuel charge. So then this guy thought, oh man, you're charging me 7%. That's crazy, Yeah. But we found out like 6 months later that we done it. Like, oh shoot, man, we would never do that. You just got to be careful with middlemen and brokers and guys like that. So if guys are subbing out work to you, which can keep you busy, if they're busy and they just need somebody to do it, we still get other companies to sub out to us if we're available. If we're not available, we reject it because obviously, we make more money and want to focus on our customers. But if we have a truck sitting, they phone the day before, we'll send out, no problem. But that's usually like 10% that we give those guys off the job, right? You don't want to be doing 15-20%. Some guys will try mess you around. But if you're subbing to a company full time under that company, it's from 15 to 25%, like F&G. So say if you bought a crane and went to F&G, which are all owner operators. It's around 20% usually that they charge you, which is, if you think about it, is a good chunk of your profits. If somebody's taking 20% off of every job and your profits are 10, 15, percent to start.
Yeah. It could be a way to get out and like maybe meet some customers and then branch out once, you get involved with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's better just to start without it. It's better just to have those connections. So like crane companies need overflow smaller cranes to keep their customers happy. So it's just better for them to give you the 10% and be an overflow guy than be attached to one company and take 25%. It's just, yeah. And then that way, if the truck's sitting there, hey, sweet, you got a job for the day, and then you can focus on your own customers. That's the way to go. Getting your own customers, because you're the first one that they ditch in a recession, right? Or when times are slow, winter, it's like, well, we're keeping our own guys busy. See you later. And then you're focused on just taking work from them and not your own customers, and you're sitting there, right? So, yeah.
When you say 10% fuel, is it 10% of the hourly, just say 4 hours and it's 10% of the 4 hours worth, or is it 10%? Where does the 10% come from? That's what my question is.
Yeah, it's just like, it's almost like tax. So it's on the whole job. Yes. A lot of customers actually don't like it. They would just rather us say, instead of 265, just say 185. We do get kind of a few complaints with that, because then it's like, okay, they're doing quotes, they got to add another number to the thing and remember that, right? Depending on what your customers say, I would even take out that 10%. Some guys, like, I don't know, we just have basically copied the crane companies around us, and they all do 10%, fuel charge. So it's almost maybe sounds like the hourly rate is less, and it's like 10% doesn't seem like a big number, so they just like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll use you or whatever, right? So, but guys, yeah, they get frustrated with all these different added costs, right? Yeah. And then I'll just go over 5, 6, and 7 real quick. My thing is, like, at the start, like, you'll be super passionate about your website, your branding, your trucks and everything. You're all jacked up. You'll go to a lot of customers, a lot of people. And I always say, like, people don't care, you might get a warm welcoming. That's great. But for the most part, people care about their own businesses and their own problems. So if you can solve their lifting problems, that's the best way to get a customer. It's like, hey, I have the truck for you. I have the trailer for you. I can do that, route or whatever. They care about you solving their problems. They don't really care, like even having a nice website. People, the average time on a website is 6 seconds, right? So people care about whatever they want to buy and whatever problems that they have. So as crane guys, we can solve their problems. So make sure that you're focusing on that. Don't get too down if you kind of don't get this like warm reception from people. At least like in recessions, when times are slower, people have more time to talk to you. But when everyone's swamped, people just won't give you the time of day, right? When you're doing sales and stuff like that. And then number 6, use your weaknesses as your strength. So you guys are one-man show. Use that as a strength and attract those smaller companies. Be more personable. You take care of your customers. Be honest when other, bigger crane companies are dishonest, and show up and be efficient. Get out of the cranes quickly, where other companies can just sit there for half an hour doing paperwork and then jump out and still charge the customer, right? And then another one, self-educate. It's the best part of business and learning, because we all have blind spots in our experiences. So self-educate in the crane business, mechanicking, and just business in general is the best tip I can give you. Do you guys have any other questions as far as like clarity on what trucks or other options?
No, I kind of asked my questions as they popped up.
That's why I kept it small, is because I wanted it to be back and forth a bit, so that we're not just forgetting questions at the end. So, but I would say, Terry, for you, something like a boom truck between 40 and 80 to get started, and stay away from the knuckle booms at all costs. Because there's like groups of people that just kind of are in our market that undercut everybody. Even though you are a valued and good operator with good crane, you cannot, you know, upcharge the market and be the leader when everyone's going, you know, cheaper and cheaper and cheaper.
Yeah, if you're a general contractor and you're trying to stay on a budget, you're just looking for the quote, who's the cheapest guy, get the job done, right? Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to make money, start with the boom trucks and specialize and get trailers and kind of.
Yeah. Which attachments really would be like highlight attachments? I highlighted that here, but like I know there's lifting forks, and then you mentioned something. There's a glass attachment that I was unfamiliar with.
Yeah, so there's a glass attachments called suction cups. For the most part, the glazers have those. I wouldn't recommend getting that specialty bar. It's basically a spreader bar with the suction cups on it with counterweights on it, so you can reach underneath different buildings like with overhangs, which is, you know, I saw one up in Alberta there. Whoever has it, I think it's like Calgary Cranes if you want to check them out on Instagram. But they'll just take over that glazing market, right, with that one specialty tool. But it looks expensive, so I wouldn't get that as your first one. But mound baskets are big, especially when you have a boom truck for reach, when guys are working on radios, towers, tree work, painting the side of buildings, signs, different things like that. That one's a big one. And then pallet forks gets you into the roofing, anything with pallets. It's kind of a must, even no matter what crane you get, you kind of need pallet forks. Because if you go to a roofing job, you can't pick them up with slings with those rolls, right? It's too dangerous. So, and then spreader bars is another big one. There's different machines that you can't squeeze at the top, different, modular houses, big AC units that you cannot have the chains rubbing up against them. They could be $500,000 machine, right? And you can't have them. So spreader bars, those are kind of the top three I would get first. And then there's, dollies, different types of dollies that you can get that can create work for you that you can't reach. So you can look into the like air conditioning dollies that have different hydraulics on them and stuff, and big wheels to roll them, and so they don't damage the roof.
And anything with 130, anything over 130 feet, you're kind of in the green light.
Yeah, so 120 feet minimum. Once you go to 100 feet, you're starting to compete with a lot of people. Once you get to 80 feet, you're competing with a lot of different cranes, right? Now that these big high abs are getting longer booms, they're coming in cheaper than a 40-ton, right? So we still have to, prove our worth, kind of thing. Yeah. Do you have anything else, Matt, that you're thinking of? Or?
No, you covered quite a bit. I appreciate it.
Sorry, there's a lot of rambling, but just kind of there's a lot to cover. But trying to provoke as much kind of questions and kind of different ideas from different aspects as possible. Because buying your first crane, it's pretty daunting to pick which one, right? To get a good head start. There's some people that spin their tires at the beginning. They're like, man, I should have picked a different industry, different crane. And then there's other guys that just hit the ground running, are nothing but success stories pretty quick, right? So
are you cool if we reach out in the future, if we do have questions, I guess?
Yeah, just
shoot you a message, and
send me a message on Instagram, even if you're thinking of buying a crane kind of thing, just let me know. And I'll kind of, sometimes I've had guys do that before, and I'm like, hey, it's got no front outrigger. It's like, oh, I didn't even know this. And it's like, yeah, it's not even, that's an extra 10 grand, and then you got to check the weights on your front steer now, because with that extra weight. So yeah, send me if you guys have any more questions. And I do coaching. I'm just kind of getting into it. Like I've done, a couple clients, but it's mostly like crane business owners that are too kind of busy and have got like 3 or 4 cranes and haven't built their business. Like we kind of modernized their business to all these different apps that save us time, where there's a lot of guys still old school, just texting their guys and it's kind of making their crane business more efficient. That's mostly what I do. And then I teach guys how to scale their business to kind of get marketing and get customers and stuff like that. So I may do another one of these and a month or two too on like branding, marketing, kind of even these like, 7 steps here, going into detail too, if you guys are interested. So we can talk about that later. But But yeah, no, it's definitely nice to meet you guys, and I'm pumped to see you guys sending me some cranes. Some hopefully not Ritchie Brothers. Don't send me any of those.
Yeah, no, even like if you say, hey, you know what, this is the people I use for inspections. Looks like a good deal. I recommend you give these guys a call so they can give it a one over. It's worth the fee, and at least then you got a peace of mind or whatever. You know what I mean? Just a little bit of guidance in the right direction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'm an open book, so ask a question, and I'll try to be as honest and forthright. Hopefully, I have the answers. Sometimes I don't have all the answers. You might have to do some research for you. Awesome. It was nice to meet you guys, and have an awesome night. Thanks for spending. We went all over there, so thanks for spending a couple hours with me. So awesome. Good night, guys.
Good night.